Hello. On this video I want to add a couple of points to the previous video. This is kind of the part 2 of the topic of practice schedule. If you didn't watch the previous video, check that out first, because I'm not going to explain all terms in this video. First I wanted to elaborate a bit on the theory why this sort of varying way of practicing. Again, we're talking about variation within the practice session, so the type of variation where we change the exercise after each repetition. Why that kind of practicing would be beneficial compared to practicing without variation, which would be again practicing with same type of, for instance, same type of vocalizing pattern many times around. For instance, going and then again same thing. So why the variation would be beneficial? This is kind of the hypothesis from the literature that has been mentioned. It could be the case that when we practice without variation, we might be using more of the so-called short-term memory, more precisely the working memory. And in that case, the problem is that all the information that our brain receives from the practicing will be forgotten quite quickly. So if we in that case, if we test our learning the day after, for instance, it is probable that there isn't much skill left. This is something that is always measured when improvement of motor skill is tested. This is sort of the parameter for measuring this is called retention, and then the other parameter that we usually measure when we test our motor learning is the transfer of the skill, which we talked about yesterday or on the previous video as well. So how the skill can be transferred to other sort of movements, or in case of singing, for instance, other pitch levels and so on. Okay, but that's one thing I wanted to mention, that the reasoning for what we have been discussing related to the variation and its benefits might relate to using of the working memory. And in the case of having the variation in the practicing, it is predicted that in those cases we're not able to use the working memory. Instead we will be using the long-term memory, which could make the learning a little bit better and to stick in our brain, so to say. Other thing would be what I wanted to talk about on this video was the benefits of the blocked practice schedule. In some instances we might want to rely on blocked practicing, and it seems to be the case that blocked practice schedule might have benefits when we're starting out practicing a new skill. So when how are we doing? Mites menee? Oot sä tyylisesti nyt taas juttuihin? So when we are starting out practicing a new skill, and we want to kind of build up the very basic technique, if we compare it to practicing a golf swing, that would include the basic posture and the head placement and this sort of very general thing. In one basic theories of motor learning, which is called schema theory, this would be called kind of building up the general motor program, and the other parts of practicing the skill would be kind of more of fine-tuning the parameters that control the movement. And in the first mentioned case, it might be beneficial. There might be a place for blocked practice schedule instead of, for instance, random practice schedule. So in those cases, we might actually rely, at least partly, on having less variety in our practicing. If you think about my approach, I made a couple of videos where we have been practicing actually singing vocal technique. There you also might notice that in the beginning we didn't have that much variation in our practicing. We concentrated more on inhaling, then activating the support and just steady vowel phonation without changing the pitch too much. And then after that, on the next video, we started to add more variation in our practicing, and that is explained exactly with this kind of thinking, that in the beginning we might partly rely on blocked practice schedule, but then we start to move on more and more towards random practice schedule. Let's see if I'm attacked by birds. That's one big bird. Okay. Yeah. And lastly, I think it should be mentioned that these things can be sometimes a little bit misleading for somebody who wants to train their voice, because when we practice, it doesn't always happen or usually actually doesn't happen the way that the practice session would be successful when we see improvement during the practice session. That's often due to exactly using our working memory, which allows us to see improvement very quickly. So this is a bit of a pitfall in vocal training, and it's often even said that you should kind of vocal technique should be working immediately and you should see improvement right away. So some voice pedagogues also kind of throw gasoline on this way of thinking. But at least in the literature of motor learning, it is well known that the improvement during the practice session is very poor predictor for the actual learning. Actually, it's often just the opposite way around. When we might not see any improvement during the practice session, but if we have still practiced efficiently being knowledgeable of the principles that affect the learning, then we still are probably going to see improvement the next day. And the kind of improvement that we see is a lot more lasting. And I also mentioned quickly that in addition to the achieved learning, the skill is also kind of more flexible, can be transferred to other activities that are close to what we were practicing. So that kind of thing. Okay, let me think if I had something else on my mind before we wrap this up. Oliver is now just happy, sucking his fingers, so I might have a moment. I think that was most of it. So at this point, if you're new to my channel, if you don't mind, help me out, subscribe. That will poke the algorithm and help me get more following and views for my videos. Also like my videos, that's also helpful. So that being said, have a happy practicing. See you on the next videos.